you hear me well? Yes? Good. How are you doing? Good afternoon. Woo! So, I'm curious how many times you heard Angular Ivy in this conference? Too many? Great. So actually, this talk is not really about Angular Ivy. It's more about what's coming up next when Ivy is going to get released. And one of the main concepts that Ivy is actually enables us, which I call standalone component in the world of Angular Ivy. Before that, how many of you already running their projects on Angular Ivy? Zach! A round of applause to Zach. So, I'm Eliran. I'm the CEO of eSquare, which is a consulting company based in Israel. I'm a GDE for Angular and Web Technologies. I'm the organizer of Angular App Conference and Angular IL Meetup, and then also a writer in Angular in Depth. Today, we're going to talk about Angular Ivy. We're just going to do a really short reminder, what is Ivy? I know Martina gave an amazing talk about Ivy yesterday. So I won't going to repeat her, but just in case we will do a short reminder. I don't know how many of you checked the changelog of Angular, but from version 9, which is already RC, Angular Ivy is now compiled. Angular is now compiled with Ivy by default, which is really exciting news for all of us. So, what is Ivy? A short flashback. Ivy is actually the third renderer shipped by the core team. We had the template compiler, then in version 4 we had the view engine, and now we got Ivy. Why Ivy? There's a lot of good reasons of why the core team changing the renderer once again. And we will get faster compilation, simple debugging, improvement in type checking, and mostly it's going to be backward compatible. So you shouldn't be, migrating from view engine to Ivy is going to be almost transparent to you as developers. But above all those, Ivy is also going to cut the bundle. And you're asking yourself why it's important for you as developers, and because of this. Maybe not iPhone, maybe Huawei or Xiaomi or another cell phone. So it might sound insane, but 63% of US online traffic come from smartphones and tablets. By the end of this year, almost 80% of internet usage is expected to arrive from mobile. So now we know why Ivy is important for us and why it's important to cut the bundle. Now I want to speak about what's coming up next. And where we're starting, let's start with the idea of having one single component, okay? In our case, a counter component. It has a one input, which is the counter, one output, which emitting the value, and buttons of plus and reset, which increasing the counter value and resetting the counter. Easy. This is, by the way, in a nutshell, what Angular is all about. Yeah, we're creating components so we can use them as a custom HTML selectors. But in order to do this, we will have to do the following steps. Create an NgModule, declare our counter component inside this module. After that, export also this counter component. Now we have to bootstrap this module, import it in our application, and only then we can start using this custom selector, right? So I've checked the Angular docs, and I found this. A component must belong to an NgModule. And I don't know what's about you. For me, it's sounds really weird because modules are much more than components. Modules have injectors, providers, DI, zones, much more than just a simple component. NgModules for me represent applications. And I only wanted one single component. My point is, applications are not components. And sometimes we want to render just one component without being tied to any module. What's really shiny about Ivy, that it finally gives us the way to render a component in a matter of simple function. Data render component function. But there is a price. NgModules defines for our zones, injectors, providers, directives and pipes. If we're not going to declare our component inside a module, we will have to do those things by ourselves. Want to see it in action? Some live coding to wake you up? Woo! So, we're going to have 5 different examples, okay? Demonstrate the idea of how to render a single component outside the module. Let's start with the first one. By the way, if you're asking yourself, what is this theta sign prefix all those functions, this means, unless you're coming for Greece and you have it on your keyboard, means that those functions are still private, okay? And the core team might not want you to use them yet. For me, it always translated in my mind as Eliran, hey, new APIs, go build your application, deploy to production with it. So, yeah, let's start with the first example. Okay. Good. So we have the simple counter component, right? We're clicking on the plus, the value increased, we're clicking reset, counter, okay? Now, instead of just using the selector, the custom selector we created, I will mark it up. And here, on init, I will call the theta render component function, okay? Which is a function I just imported from Angular core. Now, I can use the counter component like that. Let's see. I'm getting an error, and the error is that the render component function can't find the host. So let's also declare a host. And I can create any host that I like. I can also create a custom host, let's say my host, okay? And when I'm doing that, I'm seeing the counter component on my screen. Everything good, right? You can't see, but I'm actually clicking. I'm trying to increase, and nothing happens. Why is that? As we said before, modules create for us zones. Zones create change detection for us. So, let's see the counter component again. And you know what? We can also console log the counter value. And also when we are resetting, and now we can see that the console is actually happening, but the screen is not yet, which means we don't have change detection. How we actually can enable change detection? So with Ivy, we have a new function called theta detect changes. And when I put it on the plus and reset, you see that the template is actually updating, okay? Let's do something more interesting. I have here a service. I called it a storage service. It's injecting the HTTP client, okay? And it's implementing just one function, save counter. What does function do? It's just sending a post to some fake URL. We're not going to actually do something with the URL. We just want to see that the request is triggered. So let's go back to our counter and use this service. So I'm injecting the storage service, and here I'm going to add just a function called save, okay, which taking the storage service, save counter with the counter value, and because this is an observable, we have also to subscribe, okay. Now I already have a button, a save button, okay, with bind to click to trigger the save function. Let's see what's happening. Oh, I'm getting an error. The error is inject must called from an injection context. And again, because we're running outside of modules, we don't have an injection context. Who has an injection context? The application who actually runs this function, right? So if I will go to my render component again, here, render component function as an injector. Where can I get an injector? So I can inject the injector. It makes me laugh to say inject the injector. Injector of type injector. And I can pass only this injector. And I will have an injector, and when I will click the save, you will see that the post HTTP was triggered. With Ivy, we can do something even more interesting. I can just create a variable called an injector. What it does, it's calling the theta directive inject function, which is just a function from Angular core. I imported from Angular core. And this function is just asking for an injection token. So I will pass the injection token, which is injector, and I can just use it. Dependency injection without the constructor. Okay? And it still works. Great. Let's go to demo number 2. Yeah. So, a lot of us using async pipe, right? Who's using the async pipe? So, the async pipe is a really important one. It's actually not only getting the latest value of our observable in the template, it's also unsubscribe automatically when you're destroying your component. But most importantly, it's also calling the mark for check function, okay? So let's have a look in this example. We have a component, okay? This component getting some post array from just a JSON placeholder. And this is how the template looks like with the async pipe. Now, let's say I don't have zone. I'm running outside of zones. So let's see what's happened. So this is the actual result, okay? Now, if you want to cancel zones, sorry, Gia, don't worry, it's just for the example. I'm not going to cancel zones. You can go to your main file, main TS file, and here when you're bootstrapping the module, you can just say ngzone, nope. And if you check now, nothing is on the screen. So you're asking yourself how the async pipe is going to work without zones. now the core team, together with the community, some key members of the community, working on a new thing that we'll call the push pipe, okay? And this is how it's going to look like in the future. We're going to have something like the push pipe that's going to replace the async pipe for those matters. Amazing. I mentioned the mark for check function which the async pipe is using. I will talk about another optimization which is really part of all of your application, I hope, OnPush component strategy. And let's see the example. Now, I have two components here. This is the wrapper component, the container component, okay, which hold a behavior subject with some numbers, okay? Now, inside of it, I have an app child, which just, this app child is just iterating and showing me all the items that I have in the array. Now, I'm holding the numbers 1, 2, 3, and when I'm clicking the button, I want to add the number 4. So let's go back to our code. Let's return zones, of course. We need it. Now, there is the number. When I'm going to click on the number, I'm getting the number 4. Now, let's say I will change. Let's go to our child component. And let's say that I want to make this optimization and change the change detection strategy to OnPush. Any guess what will happen? I'm clicking and nothing happens. What's happened? We have to tell Angular to mark this component for check on the next cycle. So we have two options. The first one is actually inside the subscribe. When we're getting the next emit, we can just call the change detector ref marked for check. Sorry. And now it will work. With Ivy, we have another option. We don't have to use the dependency injection. We can just use the theta mark dirty function. And it still works. Great. Thank you. Demo number 4, one of my favorites, dynamic imports. Imagine this scenario where you have sort of a chat on your website. And this is, let's say, the customer service chats, okay? Like an intercom on your website. And when you have something like that, you're probably using it as part of your layout, right? It's going to be in your layout module. And the problem is that it's, when it's have to be part of any of the pages of your application, it will end up in your main bundle. And most of my clients have this intercom on their applications, but from analytics we got, we saw that only less than 2% of the users really using these chats, okay? But the weights in bytes is more than 500 kilobytes for something only 2% of the users actually using, which is crazy. Angular, from version 8, gave us the ability to load modules with the ES6 import function. Now we have this. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Now we have this. Why don't we try to do the same exact thing directly on components? And let's see it in action. So inside, I will create a button, okay? And we'll add a click listener, which is going to load counter. Load counter. Okay. Let's implement this function. All right. So I'm going to use the import function. I'm going to navigate to my counter component. Okay? Now, this will return me a promise. Inside the promise, I will get something which I know is the component. And now, which function I want to call? The theta render component function with the C counter component. Let's already declare the host and the injector, of course. Yeah. Let's add the host to the template. And before I'm going to check it, let's clean all the references of the counter component from our application. So I'm going to clear this import, and I'm also going to the first example we have, and I'm going to clear this render component function. Now, if we have a look on the network tab, on our JS files, only when I'm clicking the load counter, only then I'm paying for the counter component module, okay? Which is a huge improvement. Now you can actually load complete component or features in a matter of just a click or any other event, and not only when you have a route change or a route event, okay? Cool. How much time I have? I have time? Well, that will be the last example for today, but in my mind, the most exciting one. My friends knows that the last period I talked a lot about HOCs and why they are so important in Angular. A lot of React developers enjoying using these HOCs, and now we are, as Angular developer, finally can do it. What is HOC? HOC is just a function. Function who's get a component and return a component, but because this is a function, we can affect the component in between, okay? In this demo, I will create something that's called the unsubscriber HOC. It's something that my company works to release as an open source, which hopefully will be soon. And I will ask you a question. How many of you worried from RxJS live subscriptions that you're not cleaning? Raise your hands. A lot. That's good. Let's have a look on this example. So I have a timer component. I have just a simple subscription here, counter subscription. It's listening to a timer which ticks every second. Inside, I have a time operator, console logging. Every time that this subscription is still alive, the console will still ticks. I have a wrapper component, okay, which uses this timer, and there is two buttons. The one is destroying the timer, and the other one is reviving the timer. Let's see it in action. So, let's have a look in our console. We have a counter component, the timer component with the destroy and revive. The counter is ticking, the console is ticking. What's going to happen when I click destroy? Click destroy, the component is dead, but the subscription is still there, right? Because I didn't unsubscribe on destroy. If I will revive it again, what will happen? I will have two subscriptions, okay? Destroy it again, revive it again, and this is how basically you're creating memory leaks in your applications. So, let's see what I'm trying to create. I will go to a new file, okay, and create a function, unsubscriber. Function which not getting anything. Here, I will return something that's called the component type, okay, which will be a function. Sorry, I will return a function who's getting the component type, okay. From the component type, I can first get the original factory. The original factory will be on the component type, NgComponent, NgComponent def factory. Because now with Ivy, and I know Martina mentioned it before, with Ivy we have the factories. We don't have separate files anymore. Now the factories are static functions inside our NgComponent def. So I'm getting the factory. Now I've got the factory. I can override it to get the function who's taking the args, and with it, first of all, I can create a component instance. How I'm creating the component instance? I'm just invoking the original factory. Yeah, I misspelled it, but never mind. The original factory with the args. Amazing. Let's return the component. Whoa. Let's return here the component type. And this is basically the simplest agency you can see. Okay, we're just taking a component and returning a component. We said that this is a function and we can do something in between. Let's for now just console log the component. Okay, the component instance. Amazing. How we can use this SageOC? Let's go to our timer, and here I'm putting another decorator, unsubscriber. Now I have to rebuild my application again. Let's wait. And once it's ready, we can see in the console everything didn't change, okay? Everything is still the same. We have the component, but we actually console log the component instance, which is amazing. Now, let's do something more interesting. We have the component def, so we know that on the component def, we have NgComponent def. On the component def, we have another thing called onDestroy. Without the info. OnDestroy. Let's override the Angular onDestroy in our HOC. I will pass a function, okay? This function will first check if the user, if the component instance have something that's called NgOnDestroy. If so, I just want to invoke the function. So I won't going to override the user onDestroy. Second thing I want to do is take object keys of the component, okay? Yeah. And here, I want to iterate through each and every key of the component. I will iterate for each and every key. If this key is of type subscription, I have an helper function which I already wrote. If you want, it's going to be in this repo. I will share it with you later on. This is how you can check if the type is subscription. If the key is subscription, the component in place prop, what I want to do? Just call unsubscribe. Unsubscribe. Amazing. Let's go back and check it out. We have the component, the timer is ticking, the console is ticking. Let me destroy. Magic. So this is how you can create automatically RxJS unsubscriber with HOCs, and this is why I think this thing is really amazing. You can do much more interesting thing than that, but this is just a basic example why HOCs are going to be important part of our life. I can mention Mike Ryan that gave an amazing talk in Angular Connect about how the NGRX projects are use HOCs store to connect the store. Really encourage you to see the talk. Well, we're all talking about Angular 9, and I have the opportunity. Angular 9 is really about to get released. It's already in RC, and it's not only Ivy. It's mostly Ivy, but not only Ivy. There's a lot of new features like the form control name can now accept numbers. The testbed get now moved to testbed inject, which also going to be type safe. You're actually going to get the type. ViewChild now have a default value of false, so you don't have to add it anywhere. We have a better localization support with the Angular localized package. TypeScript 3.6 is now supported. Modules with provider is now a generic class. Deprecation of entry component that you just saw why is deprecated because you don't need, we have the factory inside the component. We don't need to generate factories anymore, so we don't need entry component anymore, and many of other improvements. You already can upgrade yourself to Angular 9 and test it. The only thing you should do, once it will be released, just ng update Angular CLI and Angular Core. And if you want to play with it right now, just run ng update Angular CLI next, Angular Core next. Let's summarize what we had today. So Ivy, the third generation of Angular compiler, is just around the corner. It will be released in version 9 and will change the way we think about Angular applications. With that, we will have the ability to do a lot of feature stuff with Angular, like standalone components, smarter change detection, easier dynamic loading of modules and components, HOCs, and I haven't spoke about it today, but Ivy also really sets the ground for Angular elements to start being important part in any application. I know it hasn't released yet, but I really encourage you to give it a try right now. I wrote 2 popular blog posts. I'm not sure if it's available in China, but if not, just contact me and I find a way to pass the data to you. 2 popular blog posts. The one is everything you should know about Angular Ivy, and the second one is the future of standalone components in the world of Ivy. If you need help with Ivy, or not only, or you just want to talk, this is my WeChat, and you can contact me anytime. We do a lot of consulting if you need help or your company need help with Angular. So this is our thing. Yeah, if you're asking Zach, this is my picture from outside kissing myself. Yeah. And this is my handles. If you're looking for me anywhere on the web, you can find me on eliassy.dev. This is my personal website, and e2.io, this is the company website. Thank you very much.